Hello, welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex.
Today we're going to talk about Watchmen, Titans,
And the Arrowverse.
and the Arrowverse.
American Horror Story.
American Horror Story. So, spoilers for all of them. Let's start with Watchmen. What did you think of this episode of Watchmen?
It was a little bit more satisfying than the first one. It filled in a few gaps. The old guy is very intriguing. I still think it's moving kind of slowly, like it hasn't really gotten on its feet yet, but I'm intrigued to see where it's going, so I mean, I'm definitely going to keep watching it. But,
Yeah, it's super mysterious, lots of intrigue. Damon Lindelof was one of the main guys involved with Lost, so he's sort of previous for unanswered questions. I thought it was a really good hour of TV. I was pretty invested in it. I think the thing I liked most about it was we got a little meat on the bone of what the White Knight was. Just as it's the clock ticking over to Christmas, I thought it was quite interesting. They had the clock like 2 minutes to midnight, kind of like the original Watchmen. At midnight, the cavalry had found this list of all the police's names and addresses, and they attacked them, and they largely destroyed the entire police force. It is kind of incredible, really, and that was from that moment on.
They didn't really destroy it. It was just, they killed enough people that the rest of the force were just like, screw this.
Yeah.
We don't want to be cops anymore. Like,
Yeah.
And so the rest of the force just resigned, except for Angela and her mentor.
Yeah, and so that was the moment they wore masks. Kind of a huge moment, I think, in this story that we're being told. A lot of people have referred back to that day already, that the day as everything changed. And I thought it was a really well done fight scene. She, got her guns, she's got all her little maneuvers.
Did you say, like, she kicks ass?
She's super badass.
She goes from dancing with her husband and, like, having a really sort of sweet moment to just, like, boom, all of a sudden she's, like, beating the shit out of this guy, and, like, she actually wins, and then somebody else comes in and shoots her.
Yeah, and I wondered how she wasn't kind of finished off in that moment, because I think she passes out as another person is kind of looking over her.
Well, the thing I wondered, because when they're in the hospital, he says that she got her guy.
Yeah.
So it's unknown that there was a second guy or second person in the house with her who shot her. So it makes me kind of wonder, like, who that person was and what their motivations were for shooting her, and maybe, like, it was somebody that she knew and there was a reason for leaving her alive. I don't know.
Final scene of the whole thing, we find out that Judd has clan robes.
That was, like, the one part, not the clan robes, but the literal. The old guy said he had skeletons in her closet, so she's like, I'm gonna go look in his closet. It's like, come on, she's smarter than that. Like, she took it just kind of like a little too literally.
Did the thought enter your mind that maybe Judd was the member of the cavalry that was looking down on her as she'd been shot, the kind of the second person? Don't know if that's too much of a stretch.
I wondered that when they were talking in the hospital, and he mentioned that she killed the one guy, because surely there should have been some indication that there was a second or third person there that, like, nobody knew about. So when they were discussing in the hospital, I did kind of wonder, like, of course, Judd has always been sort of the character that I looked on with distrust. I don't know if it's because he's, like, the head of the police force and they wear masks, or the fact that Southerners are always made into villains, and I now expect that despite being a Southerner. So I've always kind of been distrustful of him, and I was actually surprised that they killed him off so quickly.
Yeah.
But now we've got, like, the clan robes, and we don't really know where that's going to lead us. But it's an interesting premise.
I mean, what do you make of the show as a whole? Because to me it feels like what Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix film, is to the DCEU. This feels far more kind of contemporary, grounded, and more adult take, but only a fairly tenuous link to the original source material. Would you say that's kind of how you're feeling? Because that's how I'm feeling at the moment.
As I watch it now, I kind of divorce it from Watchmen.
Yeah.
I mean, there are the little, like, token nods to Watchmen lore and stuff, but it doesn't feel like it's actually a Watchmen show. It just kind of feels like something that was inspired by Watchmen and is kind of its own separate thing. So after the first episode, I did kind of just categorize it as its own little thing. And as that, it's a very interesting show. It's an interesting premise. Angela is a really captivating character. She absolutely, like, kicks ass. She has a cool costume. I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what she does next and where she goes with it. I like the way they've done the flashbacks so far. I mean, some shows, we've talked about this, they mismanage the flashbacks, but I think in this case, like, the show has done them really well so far and given us just enough information that we need to move on with the storyline.
This has reached the point now where I would recommend this to anybody who had even a fleeting interest in the genre of kind of graphic novels or adaptations of graphic novels. the thing I like about it so far, and I'll bring in Batwoman because I think I said in week 2 or week 3, every kind of mystery was immediately resolved, and that was kind of one of the issues I had with Batwoman. I like that we're being teased and tantalised a little bit here, and there is a bigger storyline kind of growing. The bit with Jeremy Irons, like, I've no idea where that's heading.
Yeah, it's just it seems completely out in left field from like what the rest of what's going on, but presumably because it is Jeremy Irons, it's going to be fairly significant, and at some point we'll see the two storylines link up together, which is again really there's a lot of intrigue in this show so far. I would like a little bit more world building, maybe a little bit more character development from the other characters besides Angela.
She is the kind of bedrock upon which the whole show is built, and that is really good because she's being fleshed out so well, but it's incredibly troublesome because
the other characters
nothing else
aren't.
really, is there?
Yeah, like there's the guy with the silver mask. He's kind of interesting and weird, and he had like a really close relationship to Judd. Plus, there's the fact that like he wears a silver mask when nobody else does. There's her family situation. Presumably, she's her kids, and it's sort of implied that she took her partner's kids after the White Knight. And there's the guy from Supernatural who was sitting out on the porch. We don't really know what his relationship to the kids is. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities for them to do some more character building, to fill us in a bit more on the people around Angela. I think they've made a really strong introduction of her, which is great since we're following her, but now they need to kind of pick up the slack with the other characters a little bit, flesh them out a little bit more, and give us a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of what kind of world we're in. But overall, yeah, I mean, I would recommend this to anybody who likes the genre. Probably people who aren't necessarily into the genre would be like, it's not really a superhero thing. It's kind of more dystopian than like comic book superhero. So I think it could appeal to a wide range of people.
I'm really enjoying season 2 of Titans, but I'm getting to the point where I've kind of got a bit of whiplash going on.
Yeah, we keep bouncing back and forth between the past and the present. Weirdly, though, I think this sort of flashback episode kind of worked. At least it worked better than the other flashback episodes, because it did fill in a huge chunk of the story that we were missing and that we needed to know for the present tense. And I don't know that it could have been done as effectively in flashbacks interspersed between a present tense storyline. But because they've done this to us so many times, like when the episode started, I just thought, oh god, here we go again. We're having another like momentum killer. We're going to go off on this like side tangent that has nothing to do with what's happening, just to fill us in on some backstory. But I did find Jericho's story pretty interesting. So.
Yeah, it was absolutely information that we needed. But the last 5 episodes, Aqualad was a flashback, Deathstroke was present day, Connor was a flashback, Bruce Wayne was present day, and now we've got Jericho again, which is a flashback. Presumably next week we'll be in present day as well. There is a time and place for flashbacks, and yes, like you said, we needed this information, but this isn't working for me. This I think so many of them. I
think Jericho would have worked if we hadn't had the previous 2 flashback episodes. If they'd just sort of filled us in on the Connor stuff and the Aqualad stuff in the present day, and then we'd gone to a flashback with Jericho, I think that would have been the best way to do it. But as you said, we are like bouncing back and forth between the past and the present a hell of a lot, and I kind of think it's lazy storytelling.
Yeah, it's probably my only complaint with the season as a whole so far. I'm finding the villain very compelling. Question for you: why isn't Deathstroke like a Justice League level villain?
I'm not sure. But yeah, it does beg the question of like, I mean, he's almost unstoppable. Yet the Justice League has kind of left him to the Titans to handle, both in the past and now. And it does broach an interesting question of like, why are these kids going up against such a hardened, superpowered criminal? And why is he wasting his time with them? Yeah, I feel like Batman needs to... It would be a Batman level villain to come in and deal with. Obviously, he's trying to avenge the death of his son. I mean, we should probably talk about what actually happened in this episode. We find out that the Titans were hanging out with Jericho, and they had moments where they could have frozen him out. They could have said, right, we've taken enough everybody wanted
information
to,
from
but
him.
Dick kept like, and Dawn mentioned it at one point that he has like this compulsion to save kids, and he needs to learn to let go. And I mean, that's come up a few times with Rachel and Jason and a few others, that he has this soft spot for kids in rough places. But ultimately, it leads to Jericho's death. I mean, Jericho's actual death was fairly predictable. I figured that Dick didn't actually kill Jericho. They wouldn't do that. But it was very dramatic last week when Dick was like, "I killed him."
Yeah.
And then they walked it back, and it's basically the usual thing. If he didn't actually kill them, he's just sort of indirectly responsible for the kid's death. I'm curious about the relationship between Rose and Jericho, because in the flashback scenes, she wasn't present at all, and yet she knew that Jericho was her brother and seemed to have some sort of attachment to him.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious about Slade Wilson's family at this point.
I just found it really interesting to know that the Titans were kind of fallible, and this whole episode was about them having failed as a unit, and that's why they chose to bow out, because of the death of Jericho. I think they all could have been a bit firmer with Dick, but they were kind of happy for him to continue to use this kid for information, which was kind of terrible. It kind of makes them seem really dirty. It's kind of a stain that they probably still haven't washed off.
I mean, there is that side to it, but you can also understand why in the moment, because this is directly after Garth's death, and that affected all of them pretty strongly. I mean, Dawn even told Dick to be Batman. Of course, then she later regretted that because nobody really likes Batman. So you can kind of see that like they do have a few conversations about how they're not entirely comfortable with what they're doing, but it's that they believe that the ends justifies the means, and they really want to avenge Garth's death, particularly Wonder Woman, Donna
Troy.
Yeah, Donna Troy, yeah. So I think this episode really sort of highlighted why Deathstroke is such kind of like a hot button issue for the Titans. So there was a lot of emotions and a lot of complications in the situation.
Yeah, I didn't quite see it like that. I just think they had moments where they could have walked away. They had moments where they could have kind of maybe frozen him out. But yeah, Dick just took it too far, and I think they all could have been firm with him. I think that was the issue, and they just seemed like they kind of stained their brand. And when they were in the doorway going down the lift, I felt like they were all kind of as disgusted with themselves as they were with him. Like they kind of felt that they let themselves down as well as kind of Jericho.
See, I felt like they placed the blame kind of entirely on Dick, because he did the thing that he always does where he makes a plan with the group and agrees to something with the group, and then he goes off and does something completely different without talking to anybody or telling anybody what he's done. And I perceived it like that was why they walked, was because their kind of fearless leader was not being a good leader and resulted in this kid getting killed. You know, because like he brought Jericho to Titan Tower without even saying anything to everybody, and they weren't like warm and fuzzy. They were kind of like, Dick, what the fuck? But at that point, like, Jericho was in Titan's Tower, and then they found out that he had powers. And I mean, I did find it like that they just kind of like switched right then and were like, oh yeah, you should join the Titans. Like, that was a little bit forced. They probably could have had more discussion with Dick about like, what are you thinking? Like, why did you bring this kid here? Garth just got killed, and you want to bring Deathstroke's son into the team. Like, we should be thinking about like what our responsibilities are and you know, dealing with that.
What did you think of the final sequence? I thought there was that great moment. They were in like a church or something.
Yeah.
Great chat between Deathstroke and Dick. No kind of sense of melodrama. It was just all down to action. Great fight scene. And then obviously Jericho runs in to be a human barrier between Deathstroke and Dick, but he gets stabbed. I thought that was a really good scene. I think that Titans is setting a really high bar for kind of final act fight sequences. I think they do a really good job with that. They talk a good game, and they kind of got really good choreography for fights as well. I think it's why it kind of elevates it for me slightly above some of the other shows that we watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you compare it to the Arrowverse, like, there's a huge gap in between the two of them in terms of quality and choreography. Like, I really appreciated the last sequence, because, you know, after Dick and Slade kind of have this chat, there is no other dialogue for the rest of the episode, and it just kind of leaves you, you know, they have this kind of beautiful music in the background, and you're just sort of watching the scene play out. And then you see like the end of the Titans, and there's no sort of big speech about it. There's no kind of Slade having a heart-to-heart with his son at the last minute. Like, there's no melodrama to it. It's just very sort of laid out in front of us. This is what happened. This was the consequence. and this is how we got to the point that we are at in the present day. And so I like that. I think in comic book movies sometimes we have like, I mean, we can talk about it when we get to Arrow in a bit, but like the death scenes get played out a bit too much, and they tend to follow a certain pattern. So I liked that this was wholly visual, and we didn't have any of these, you know, like last minute heartfelt confessions or anything like that. We didn't have the Titans railing against Dick and arguing with him and you know, telling him anything really. We just had this kind of line of them walking out the door looking kind of disgusted with him, and him looking disgusted with himself as well. So that was a really good way to end the episode.
Yeah, so that's 2 for 2.
Yeah,
that we've liked this week so far.
Yay!
It's a bit of a rare occurrence. Let's move on to American Horror Story. Let's see if that changes.
I don't know how I feel about this episode. I think I'll have to like wait and see where exactly they go with it, but it seems kind of like we're just going to have a repeat of the first 5 episodes, because everybody's coming back to the camp, and so it's just going to be more people running around in the woods getting murdered again. Yeah,
because we had the 70s massacre, we've had our 80s massacre, so I think we're in 1989, just about we're going to start the 1990s. I think we're going to get probably like a third massacre, 3 separate decades, 3 separate massacres. The thing I liked most about this episode was the fact that Chet, Xander, Montana, Ray were barely in it. That's the thing I really liked. I think they are just all very plain, one-dimensional characters that have no interest to me whatsoever.
I was kind of hoping that, like, since they all got killed, that would be the end of them.
Yeah.
But
no such luck.
No,
yeah.
not in American Horror Story. Nobody's ever really dead in American Horror Story.
Yeah, and the thing I found weird is that I think this was my favourite episode of this season so far. There was none of those kind of younger characters. There was this Jingles Ramirez kind of story, which one betrayed the other, one came out of like prison, potentially killed his, I don't know how he got the whole way up to Alaska, potentially killed his wife. And there's like genuine beef between these two now, which is going to come to a head at this Camp Redwood Music Festival. And it didn't feel cheesy, it didn't feel spoofy. This felt kind of closer to prime American Horror Story tonally and what they were actually presenting to us. So I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm maybe even rooting for Jingles now. I want to see this confrontation between the two of them. It'll be Jingles versus Ramirez. Presumably Jingles will win this time, and then it'll be Jingles versus Margaret in her, because she's this property mogul now who buys all these haunted, all these buildings where terrible massacres have occurred or killings have occurred, and she turns them into kind of tourist attractions. So that's why she's got this Camp Redwood Music Festival. But like Montana said, it's going to turn into like a killing field. Everyone's going to die, and then the ghosts are going to kill each other, and it's just going to never end. But I'm kind of looking forward to this particular confrontation. They can do whatever they want, the young actors, but Jingles versus Ramirez, that's kind of piqued my interest.
I think the Jingles Ramirez thing is the best part about the episode.
Yeah.
And if it was just going to be about the two of them, like, I would be totally down for that.
Yeah.
I think like they should double down and just do Jingles and Ramirez, because that's a really interesting conflict. You have this completely unapologetic, unremorseful serial killer who just seems to kill people for no particular reason. They annoy him or they get in his way, and so his solution is to kill them. And then you have Jingles, who was like kind of manipulated into believing that he was this mass murderer and then killed people, and has now kind of reformed himself and gotten back to who he really is, and set up a life and everything in Alaska. And I was really happy for him, you know, and he had his little like domestic life and whatever. I'm not that into the ghosts. I don't really care about Margaret. The whole thing with her and Trevor, I didn't really see the point in that.
No, me neither.
I am a little intrigued about why the psychologist brought Brooke back to life and how she managed to do that. Yeah,
that was I had all kinds of problems with that.
But essentially, if they cut everybody else out of the show besides for Jingles and Ramirez, like, that's the show I want to watch.
Me too. There could be like 1,000 minor, like, you know, music festival goers getting slaughtered for fun, but these two are the showdown that I'm interested in now. The fact that he got a job at Blockbuster, I think foreshadowed.
Not Blockbuster, it's Video Shack.
Yeah.
But we, you know,
air quotes, yeah. I like that kind of foreshadowed how it wasn't going to work out. That's what because when I saw it, I thought, oh dear. But yeah, I just felt for the first time probably since not Apocalypse, not Cult. What was before Cult? Roanoke? Maybe not even Roanoke, but before maybe Hotel. For the first time since Hotel, It felt like genuine stakes that I kind of cared about. These two going up against each other. No spoofs, no gimmicks. Their beef and the kind of bit where they fell out, and like the death at the end when he was talking to the neighbour. I have to protect my son. That just felt...
his sister-in-law, actually.
Yeah, his sister-in-law. When he said to whatever her name was, I have to protect my son by finishing what I started. Yeah. That just felt like I haven't seen in years from American Horror Story. And it was a tiny fraction of one episode, but it was enough.
I really liked the scene where he dropped his son off. And I found it interesting that he just kind of left him at the door, but he was still visible to his sister-in-law. You know, he was there in his kind of Mr. Jingles outfit, and you saw like on his face this look of resignation, like this is who I have to be now. Yeah. This realization that he can't just have a good normal life as long as Ramirez is out there. And it was just like you said, it was a really brief moment in the show, but it was also a really powerful moment, which gave you a lot of insight into who Jingles is as a human being. And I mean, I think I'm definitely rooting for him in the Ramirez Jingles showdown.
It's weird how it's flipped around from episode 1 to now.
Yeah.
But like you said, let's just pray that it's not Chet and co ruining this. I think they were like, was this episode 6?
Yeah.
So 3 episodes left. So it's the shortest ever season, only 9 episodes. Let's just hope that they give the correct people the focus that they deserve. Let's have this thing play out in good time. I would be happy if we didn't see those kids anymore.
Yeah. I mean, they can completely get rid of them.
Presumably Brooke's going to have some part to play, and I'm not really into that either.
Imagine that somehow, she and the psychologist are going to go back to the camp for some stupid reason, and then the Montana et al. Are going to spend all of their time trying to kill Brooke. So yeah, I imagine that storyline is going to be happening simultaneously, and that will get kind of annoying and tedious. But hopefully the Ramirez Jingles stuff will redeem it a little bit. So let's move on to the Arrowverse.
So it seems to me that Arrow is just going to be a highlights tour. There's always going to be a MacGuffin. There's always going to be a character we haven't seen for 3 or 4 seasons. And that's it. There's not going to be anything larger at play here. We were on Nanda Parbat. We had Talia. We had Thea. It was a great little national treasure kind of treasure hunt, finding this thing. We had Betrayal, a MacGuffin, and that's all it was.
Some good fight scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, which Arrow always does well. I think probably out of all of the shows in the Arrowverse, their fight choreography is the best. It was nice to see Thea again. I mean, she's one of my favorite characters. Yeah. It doesn't seem like she's going to be part of Crisis.
No.
I was kind of hoping that we'd get to see both her and Roy for Crisis, but I think this was kind of our little farewell to Thea. And, I mean, for what it was a well put together show. I mean, nothing kind of revolutionary or earth shattering happened in this episode. It didn't even really have much to do with the upcoming Crisis. He wasn't sent on this mission for any particular reason. He went basically looking for information on the Monitor and got sidetracked by a completely different quest. And I think at the end for 2 minutes we got a little bit of what he was actually looking for. The big thing that happened is that we no longer have 2 separate timelines going on.
Imagine my joy.
Yeah. Is there any opportunity for the 2040 characters to redeem themselves in the present day now that, because presumably their 2040 storyline has been completely abandoned now that they're not in 2040, so rather than doing completely pointless things that have nothing to do with the main storyline, they're actually going to be involved. Will that make it better, or are these characters hopelessly irredeemable?
Well, I've got a lot of concerns. I'm wondering whether this means that every episode from now on will be in Star City present day, because the team is now double the size. They will just be anchored to that location for the entire rest of the season up till Crisis. I doubt they're going to put them in for an episode and then whisk them back to 2040 the next episode, as much as I want them to do that. So I'm slightly concerned about that. The fact that Oliver had to share this episode with a Diggle Lila story and a 2040 story, I just feel give the man his farewell, give the focus to Oliver. I can't imagine what the kids are going to do in 2040. I literally don't know, and I don't care. I'm just so disappointed that they're there. I assumed they would come at one point because I thought they'd be in the final Crisis. I'm just curious if it'll be an episode of family drama. Hi Dad, we've never met before, and that's it for an hour. I don't know what they're going to do other than just take on some nameless faceless goons for an episode to do a bit of father-daughter bonding while William sits in the chair. It's going to be such a waste of an episode. I'm so disappointed about it.
I mean, for me, I'm actually glad that they're out of 2040, because that was one of the big problems I was having, is that we had the main storyline with Oliver and the stuff that was going on there, but then we had the 2040 storyline, and last season we had the same problem where you had essentially two shows sharing one episode, and we had that again this season, except the plot in 2040 was completely irrelevant. Like, it was just to have them doing something in 2040, and it was very obvious that it had absolutely no, like it wasn't going to bear fruit in any sort of important sense. So I'm kind of glad that they're in the present day, because that means we won't have that split of present day and 2040 anymore. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Mia and William in the meantime, and whether or not they're going to tell Renee that Zoe's just died in their timeline.
I'm presuming they're going to do some timey-wimey stuff and she's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be to do with John Jr. or the kid that was in the Diggle storyline this time around. I can't remember his name. Connor Hawk, that's it. They're going to try and reform John Jr. or something so he doesn't become a psychopath in the future, and Zoe is fine. Yeah, what a disappointment. But the episode I thought was alright, and I like that Thea and Talia are like the joint heads of the new League of Heroes.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I hope they come up in like the not the Sirens, Canaries TV show.
I think kind of the main reason I'm enjoying Batwoman is Ruby Rose. I think the writing isn't so great. The stakes haven't really been established so far, and I don't know if they're trying to do a commentary on societal misogyny, but they keep being like there's a lot of very gendered language and comments about Batwoman as opposed to Batman, and I'm starting to get kind of annoyed with it. Like they're being very reductive about the fact that Batwoman is female, and you can kind of brush it off and be like, yeah, like in the news media, yeah, that's probably what they would say, but then like Luke goes off on this whole big thing about how she's smaller and she has shorter arms than Batman because she's a woman, and he like really emphasizes the fact that she's a woman, like, and he does this whole thing while she can't actually respond to him, and he even says that she's probably coming up with some choice words but she can't speak it, and it's this weird sort of power dynamic, and I just find it really annoying because Batwoman as a character is kind of a badass, and yet she's being treated like this kind of silly little girl, and I feel like Batwoman, I feel like the show writers and producers should be trying to step away from like that stereotype of the small weak woman.
I think I would say this is possibly the most complete episode of all of the episodes so far. I thought the third act had a lot of promise, but it was ultimately very anticlimactic. But yeah, the Sophie stuff is poison. We always make a good team, and they kind of look at each other and then, sorry, I didn't realise you were here with anyone, and the three of them kind of awkwardly stand together. It's episode 4, and I just fear that we're here now. Like, this is going to be the whole way through the whole season. I thought that her going to a gala and there being a heist was such a Batwoman thing to do, and I was so into that. Going to Magpie's little lair, the freezing cold room where she couldn't speak, she couldn't breathe, I don't think. That felt such a prime Bat fam thing to do. But every time she does something really cool, really badass, it's kind of undercut with this family drama style stuff that's happening with Sophie. I like that Mary's been brought into the fold now. She's incredibly watchable. I think she's great. I feel kind of the opposite about Sophie. We find out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like Sophie isn't that interesting of a person. Like, I don't understand why Kate is so into her. Maybe if they gave us more of a reason, like if Sophie was more interesting or more unique, or, I mean, she's a fairly bland, two-dimensional character, and Kate is not. To have them matched together, like, I found the bartender a much more watchable partner for Kate than Sophie. And I was actually a little bit disappointed that they ended it so quickly. I was as
well, yeah.
Because she's a really cool character. Yeah. She's really perceptive. You could imagine her in a couple episodes being like, you're Batwoman. And I'm cool with that. Yeah. But Sophie is just so... And I probably dislike her as well because she's just kind of like unwritten her whole relationship with Kate. And lied at the academy about being gay and then has gone and married this guy and is keeping like her whole relationship with Kate a secret. And I just feel like, you know what, it's 2019, get the fuck over yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal.
The Kate side isn't working for me, I think. The Batwoman stuff is,
Yeah.
the Kate side isn't, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, because aside from Mary, the other characters in Kate's life are not very fleshed out. And we now have this whole kind of other plot with the stepmother who's digging up the sister's grave, which didn't make any sense because they never found a body, and there's supposed to be some secret in the coffin. It didn't make any sense, and I'm not that interested. I think I'm not that interested in Alice. I think probably the best way to do the first season of Batwoman was to have kind of a villain of the week rather than a season-long villain. And then maybe in season 2 introduce Alice and kind of amp her up a hell of a lot and make her kind of almost Jokerish in terms of like her relationship to Batwoman. So like Joker's relationship to Batman, and not necessarily a Joker type character, but to give her that sort of weight and importance, because she doesn't feel like that much of a threat at the moment. She just feels like kind of a minor player who's dabbling in things. And it could also be because she's involved primarily with Kate's family rather than like Batwoman's stuff, and as you said, the like Kate family stuff isn't the strongest part of the show.
So let's round out today's episode by talking about The Flash and Supergirl. We've decided we're going to time our Flash and Supergirl reviews. We're going to cut them down to 30 seconds because we're not particularly enjoying either show. They need to be addressed, but we're just going to give each other 30 seconds. I'm going to talk about Supergirl. You're going to talk about Flash.
I don't know that I'll need 30 seconds.
Yeah, me neither.
Do you want to go first?
I will go
Supergirl?
first, yeah.
All right. There, your 30 seconds are on.
It feels like this episode is the end of the prologue to the whole season. That's what it felt like to me. James is leaving the show to buy Calvin Town Gazette to help fight injustice. One way to get around the non-compete clause. One less character on the show, I think, is a really good idea. William's investigating Rojas. The jerk persona was a lie. And Lena has a kind of abducted Malefic. He was going to the Phantom Zone, but she's made him come to a lab so she can study Q waves.
Perfect. What to say about the Flash? We sort of had kind of like a token address of Crisis, but it was mostly about Cisco and Barry, and Cisco's reluctance to admit that Barry is going to die. We know Barry's not going to die, so I kind of feel like that was a sort of waste. The best part about the episode is that Ramsey has kind of gone full villain now, so maybe we can have some more interesting things happening there. But mostly it was kind of your usual Flash family drama.
Yeah, I just think those shows at the moment aren't doing anything for me. I don't think they're doing anything for you, so we're going to be cutting those down to little 30-second snippets at the end of every episode.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Patreon. We have our website, geeknerdpod.com. If you're on Podchaser, find us, leave us a review. Yeah, see ya.
Cool, see you next week.